Your realtor lied to you. Not about the square footage. Not about the school district. About whether you'll be alive in 6 months if the system that keeps that neighborhood running stops running. Today we're fixing that 0.8 factors. Each one scored 1 to 10. Maximum 80 points. By the end of this video you'll have a number. And that number will tell you something real estate agents, city planners, and the federal government have known for decades and never once put in the listing. Get a pen. Right? Your zip code at the top. We're doing this together. But first, something the other survival channels won't tell you. Your zip code wasn't an accident. American cities were designed by people who understood exactly which locations were safe and which were not. The wealthy neighborhoods sit on high ground, near clean water, away from industrial zones, away from floodplains. That's not coincidence. That's a century of quiet decision-making by people who had access to the same data you're about to use. Today, the poorest zip codes in America cluster in floodplains, industrial corridors, and heat islands. The wealthiest cluster near water, forests, and elevation. The fox sees the pattern. The question is whether you do too. Now let's score your address. Factor 1. Nuclear target proximity. How many miles between you and a first strike target? Score 1 to 10. Write it down. FEMA won't publish the full strike list. They never will. But declassified Cold War targeting doctrine, open-source military analysis, and basic strategic logic reconstruct the map. First strike priorities. 400 active Minuteman III missiles distributed across silo fields in Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. Every single silo is a target. Not because of what's nearby. Because eliminating launch capability before it launches. This doctrine. Priority 1. You live in rural Montana and think distance protects you. The threat is underground. 0.5 miles from your nearest gas station. Second tier. Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base, Omaha. NORAD and Space Force clustering around Colorado Springs. Naval Station Norfolk, the largest naval installation on the planet. Joint Base Lewis McChord anchoring Pacific Command in Washington State. Third tier. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Not because they're fortified, because eliminating them destroys the capacity and will to rebuild. Here's what people get wrong. The kill radius of a modern warhead, roughly 5 miles. Sounds survivable at 20 miles out. It isn't. Overpressure wave extends further. Thermal pulse extends further still. Initial radiation zone, 50 miles. Fallout corridor up to 300 miles downwind. I'm not in the city is not the protection you think it is. The real question isn't distance. It's whether you're sitting in the fallout corridor. And that answer changes entirely based on which direction the wind is blowing in the day it happens. Score yourself. Within 50 miles of any target, 2 or 3.50 to 100 miles, 4 or 5.100 to 150 miles, 7. More than 150 miles from any target, not in a prevailing downwind corridor. 9. Write down your first number. Factor 2. Freshwater access. Can you walk to it? Score 1 to 10. Write it down. Here's the factor your realtor definitely didn't mention. The Colorado River Basin is at storage levels water engineers describe as historically unprecedented. 40 million people across 7 states depend on that river. Las Vegas draws 90% of its municipal water from Lake Mead. Phoenix takes 36% from the Colorado system. The engineering community has no credible restoration plan at current consumption rates. But the Colorado situation is the slow version. In any grid-down scenario, municipal water treatment plants fail within 72 hours off losing power. Pumps stop. Pressure drops. Whatever remains in the pipes becomes a bacterial growth medium. Your tap is either dry or actively dangerous. Possibly both. When that happens, the question is not whether water exists somewhere nearby. The question is whether you can walk to it, filter it, and carry it back. Not drive. Walk. Because in week 2 of any serious collapse, fuel becomes its own separate emergency. Score yourself. Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, California east of the Sierras, 2. Great Plains, groundwater dependent only, 4 or 5. Mississippi watershed within walking distance of a tributary, 7. Appalachian region with direct stream access, 7 or 8. Pacific Northwest west of the Cascades, 8. Great Lakes region, 9. If your only water source lives inside municipal pipes with no natural surface water within 5 miles on foot, you are a 2. Regardless of which state you're in. Write down your second number. Factor 3. Population density. Is the crowd around you an asset or a threat? Score 1 to 10. Write it down. New York City has 27,000 people per square mile. Wyoming has 6. This is not a political statement. This is math about what happens when supply chains stop and people get hungry. Dense urban areas carry roughly 3 days of food inventory in stores at any given moment. Just-in-time delivery doesn't stockpile. When delivery stops and thousands of people respond to the same information simultaneously, the result is predictable. Too many people. Same finite supply. Same moment. No villains required. Just arithmetic. When Prussian forces besieged Paris in 1870, a city of 2 million people discovered in real time what supply chain dependency looks like. By November they were eating horses. By December, zoo animals. By January, rats were selling at beef prices. This was not an impoverished city. It was one of the most sophisticated in the world. Density and supply chain dependency were the killers. But here's what most channels get wrong when they tell you to flee to the country. Rural isolation has its own failure modes: NO medical infrastructure, NO skill diversity, NO mutual aid when individual needs exceed individual resources. The data points to a sweet spot. Small towns, 2,000 to 15,000 people. Dense enough for community resilience. Sparse enough to avoid mob dynamics. That sweet spot is not an accident either, it's where the fox builds its den. Score yourself by county population density. Under 50 per square mile, 8 or 9.50 to 500, 6 or 7.500 to 5,000, 3 or 4. Above 5,000. 1 or 2 to write down your third number. Factor 4. Agricultural capacity within 50 miles. What remains when the trucks stop? Score 1 to 10. Write it down. The average American meal travels 1,500 miles before it reaches your plate. That supply chain has exactly one major failure point. The trucks stopped at any grid down, fuel-scarce scenario. They stop within 3 to 5 days. After that, the only food available is what's already in your home, what remains on local shelves, and what can be grown within reach without motorized transport. The USDA publishes prime farmland classifications for every county in the country. Public data. Most Americans have never looked at it. In 1941, German forces cut Leningrad off from supply routes. A city of 3 million people had built itself on the assumption all modern cities share. Food comes from somewhere else. The land surrounding it was marshes and thin soil. The siege lasted 872 days. The outcome was shaped not by military balance, but by the geography that existed before a single shot was fired. Las Vegas is encircled by 100 miles of Nevada hardpan. 0. Sustainable agricultural capacity. Miami sits on porous limestone with poor soil retention. Phoenix is ringed by caliche. These cities were not built where they were because the surrounding land was productive. They were built for other reasons, and the food supply has always been an assumption, not a geographic reality. The corridor from Ohio through Nebraska is the opposite case. Some of the deepest, most productive topsoil in human civilization. That concentration is not an economic accident. It is the reason settlement organized there in the first place. Score yourself. Prime agricultural land actively farmed within 50 miles, 8 or 9. Mixed suburban farmland with reduced but existing production, 5 to 7. Urban or industrial with no meaningful capacity nearby, 2 or 3. Desert, high altitude, or Arctic adjacent, 1. Write down your fourth number. Factor 5. What your zip code cost you. The factor nobody else scores. Stop here. Before factor 5, I want to show you something the other channels skip entirely. Add up your first 4 numbers. Look at that score. Now ask yourself one question. Did you choose that zip code, or did the economy choose it for you? Because here's what the data shows when you map survival scores against median household income. The highest scoring zip codes in America correlate almost perfectly with the highest property values. The lowest scoring zip codes, floodplains, industrial corridors, downwind from military targets, correlate almost perfectly with the lowest incomes. This is not an accident. The people who designed American zoning laws understood water access, elevation, and agricultural capacity. They built their neighborhoods on high ground near clean water. Then they made sure those neighborhoods stayed expensive enough that most people couldn't afford them. Your zip code isn't just a survival score. It's a bill you've been paying without knowing what you were buying. The fox doesn't say this to make you angry. The fox says this because understanding the system is the first step to getting out of it. Now, factor 5. Factor 5. Infrastructure dependency. How many cords are plugged into you? Score 1 to 10. Write it down. Efficiency and redundancy are not compatible goals. American infrastructure has been optimized for efficiency for a century. That means redundancy has been systematically removed. Every backup system that sits idle is a cost center, so it gets eliminated. Until it isn't. The Dutch hunger winter of 1944, Nazi authorities cut food supply routes to the Netherlands, one of the most developed, urbanized regions in Europe. Its cities had run on centralized food distribution for decades. When those networks were severed, there was no alternative to no institutional memory of local food production, no independent supply chain. 22,000 people died of starvation in one of the wealthiest corners of the developed world. Not because food didn't exist somewhere, because the distribution architecture had eliminated every independent alternative over generations of efficiency optimization. That is what infrastructure dependency looks like when it fails. 4 systems. Score each 1. Electrical grid. Can you generate meaningful power independently? Municipal water. Do you have a well or rain collection? Heating. Do you have an independent heat source without grid power? Communications. Can you operate without cell towers? Count your dependencies. Most suburban American households have all 4, not because those households are negligent. Because the architecture of modern suburban life optimizes convenience through centralized dependency. Every efficiency gain trades away a degree of independence. That is the bargain American infrastructure has been making in your behalf. Without asking. For your entire life. 3 or more working redundancies, 8 or 9.2 independent systems in place, 6 or 7.1 partial redundancy. 4. Entirely grid dependent across all 4 systems. 2. Write down your 5th number. Factor 6. Crime trajectory. The trend matters more than the number. Score 1 to 10. Write it down. We are not scoring current crime rates. We are scoring trajectory. Direction and velocity of change over the last 3 years. Here's why that distinction matters. A city with high crime trending consistently downward has something that cannot be purchased with gear. Functioning institutional mechanisms. Law enforcement with operational legitimacy. Community investment. Social stabilization systems that work. Those same mechanisms determine whether a community can self-organize when external systems fail. A city with moderate crime trending sharply upward is a different situation entirely. The social contract is already fraying under normal conditions. Remove the economic floor. Sever the supply chain. Strip away the institutional authority law enforcement requires. You are not beginning a collapse process. You are accelerating one already in motion. Constantinople remained physically defensible for decades before 1453. What had hollowed out was institutional coherence. Tax systems that no longer functioned. Military units with fractured loyalty. Civil administration losing capacity for a generation. The walls held. The institutions didn't. The trajectory was the real story. Look up your Metropolitan Statistical RI, the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Database. 3-year trend direction. Not absolute level. 1 additional signal. When major insurance carriers begin refusing to write new policies in a region, they are making an explicit actuarial statement. The risk profile has crossed a threshold where the math no longer works. Insurers don't make political statements. They make probability calculations with real financial stakes. When a location becomes uninsurable, that is a different category of warning than crime statistics alone. Declining trend, 7. Stable, 5. Rising over 3 years, 3. Already elevated and rising, 1 or 2. Write down your 6th number. Factor 7. Natural disaster overlap. How many risks are stacked at once? Score 1 to 10. Write it down. FEMA's National Risk Index scores every county in America across 18 distinct natural hazard categories. Public, free, searchable by county. Most Americans have never looked at it. Individual disasters are survivable. Communities recover from single catastrophic events. The historical record supports this. The failure mode that actually destroys resilience is overlapping hazards arriving simultaneously when normal recovery infrastructure is already under stress from another direction. Miami-Dade sits in the direct Atlantic hurricane corridor, a porous limestone aquifer experiencing accelerating saltwater intrusion with documented long-term inundation risk. 3 simultaneous overlapping hazard vectors. The Pacific Northwest carries the Cascadia subduction zone, geologically overdue for a magnitude 9 or above, last full rupture in 1700, plus intensifying wildfire seasons, plus volcanic activity from the Cascade Range. California adds drought and landslide, earthquake and fire. all on the same certificate of occupancy. Central Tennessee has occasional flooding risk. That is approximately the complete list. Look up your county in the FEMA National Risk Index. High risk on 3 or more categories, 3.2 categories at high risk, 5.1 moderate category, 7. Clean across major categories. 9. Write down your 7th number. Factor 8. Community skill density. The factor your zip code doesn't advertise. Score 1 to 10. Write it down. This is the factor the other channels miss entirely. Gear doesn't rebuild. People do. After any serious collapse, the communities that recover fastest are not the ones with the most supplies. They're the ones with the most functional skills per square mile. Doctors, farmers, engineers, mechanics, electricians, nurses, carpenters, teachers. A small town with a working doctor, a mechanic who can fix anything, and 3 farmers who know the land. That community has something a suburb full of preppers with bug-out bags doesn't. Operational knowledge that doesn't need the grid to function. University towns score unusually high on this factor. Not because of prestige, because they concentrate technical, medical, agricultural, and engineering skills in a small geographic footprint. Rural agricultural communities score high. Land-based skills, animal husbandry, seed saving, water management, don't appear in any FEMA database. But they are the skills that fed humanity for 10,000 years before the grid existed. Dense suburbs score low. Not because the people aren't intelligent. Because the economy has optimized those communities for consumption, not production. Ask yourself about your zip code. How many of your neighbors could keep people alive without Amazon and a functioning hospital system? 3 or more critical skill categories present in community, 8 or 9.1 or 2, 5 or 6. Consumption-oriented suburb with minimal production skills, 3. Dense urban core, 2. Write down your 8th number. Add up your numbers. Maximum 80 points, 65 to 80. The quiet ones. Naturally and structurally well positioned. Your location is an asset. Your preparation choices are what separate surviving from thriving. Don't waste it. 48 to 64. Fighting chance. Real advantages. Real gaps. You now know specifically which vulnerabilities you're working against. That is actionable. Preparation strategy matters more here than gear accumulation. 32 to 47. The vulnerable middle. Multiple serious structural weaknesses. This is not a gear problem. It is a root problem. Your strategy needs to address location vulnerabilities directly, not paper over them with supplies that depend on the same compromised infrastructure. 16 to 31. Structural problems. Location. Disadvantages are deep and overlapping. Relocation deserves serious consideration. Potentially a higher value investment than anything else you could spend money on. 8 to 15. The unlucky zip. Multiple critical factors at the bottom tier simultaneously. Your preparation priority is an exit strategy, not a gear list. Here's my hypothesis. 70% of you scored below 45. Not because you're unprepared. Because the American economy organized its population around economic opportunity in precisely the locations that score worst on these factors. You didn't choose a dangerous zip code. The economy steered you there. High land prices kept you out of the safe ones. Zoning laws kept the safe ones exclusive. And nobody in any of those transactions was required to tell you what you were actually buying. Now you know. The fox doesn't live where it's convenient. The fox lives where it's defensible. Drop your score in the comments. Just the number. Next time, the 7 locations every American thinks are safe. The 7 that become death traps in the first 6 hours of a real collapse. You've probably been to one of them this week. Subscribe. Hit the bell. I'm the fox. Stay light. Stay sharp.